And hello, everybody, and welcome to another evening here in Japan with the Teachers Room at iTDi.pro. We're very, very happy to have a few new faces and a regular, but a special guest tonight is Bill Snyder. We're very happy to have you, and I've been excited about this all week.
Hello, and thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I'm really, really glad to be here.
Yeah, we're actually going to put a call out at the end if anybody wants to suggest anybody or any of you that are here now that would like to come in. I feel like I've been the luckiest guy in the world doing these for about somewhere over 15 teachers so far, and it's just a thrill for me to compare notes with people's teaching journey. So let's start with that right away. Bill, you just take your time and tell us how you got from little Bill to big Bill and how that journey of becoming the teacher you are today. Just take us through your history a little bit.
Okay. I was born and grew up in a village in upstate New York, and sort of my father worked at Kodak, basically a factory worker. My mother was a nurse. And it would have been a sort of rural village, except it had a branch of the state university. And so I grew up on a street full of professors, biology professors, English professors, political science professors, basically all of the neighbors were professors. And so I grew up surrounded by that kind of environment and sort of thought, oh, I can do that.
Yeah.
Went through school, and basically my senior year in high school, I was taking Spanish, French, and Italian, but also taking calculus. And it was, am I going to do math or am I going to do languages in university?
Right.
And my bad relationship with my calculus teacher sort of decided that for me. I spent the last 10 weeks of my high school career on detention because I refused to do homework for her.
Right.
Because I just didn't see the point of it. We would do this stuff and it was all very routine, but there was no, what am I supposed to be learning from this?
Right.
And so I wound up going into, and I thought, well, what language? And I thought I could do linguistics. I'm one of those, I thought linguistics is all about languages, and I'm interested in a lot of languages, so I'll do linguistics. And actually in university, I picked up Russian as well, and I wound up double majoring in linguistics and Russian language and literature.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then I still was more interested in the linguistics side of things, so I did my undergraduate thesis on a sociolinguistic topic, the preservation of Italian in Middletown, Connecticut, where the university was. Okay. And then went to Northwestern to do a PhD in linguistics, where basically over the time doing that, part of what I learned is that I was good at solving problems, but I wasn't good at identifying problems in linguistics.
Wow.
And if you really want to have a career as a linguist, you have to be good at identifying problems. And so, but along the way, I got a teaching assistantship to teach ESL classes.
Yeah.
And I liked it. And I basically started picking up ESL jobs around Chicago. And in the middle of all that, I went and spent 2 years teaching ESL in the Soviet Union from 1988 to 1990 in Leningrad, back when it was Leningrad.
Wow.
And then came back, finished up, which dragged out for a while because my advisor was ill for the last couple of years, and so he was in and out of hospital.
Yeah.
And then finished up, and I got a 1-year position. Basically, Elliot Judd, if you know the name, he was at one point president of TESOL International.
Okay.
He was at University of Illinois Chicago, and he went on sabbatical 1 year. And I basically got to take over his classes for a year as a postdoc.
Wow.
And the really cool thing was, most people go on sabbatical and they go away. He stayed in Chicago and just spent a year working with the community colleges in the area.
Wow.
So he was in his office all the time. So I got to go and basically every week sit down and talk with Elliot Judd.
Wow.
Which was a really great learning experience for talking about methodology, talking about materials. These were things that were his specialization.
Yeah.
And then after that, I went out on the job market with my PhD and got nothing in the US, finished second for a job at one place, and got 2 job offers in Korea. One from basically a private, a big hagwon, a big private education chain, and one from Korea University, Korea Tehakyo.
Wow.
And to teach in their Institute of Foreign Language Studies. And I grabbed that, and I arrived in Korea just in time to see the won collapse. This will be a repeating theme.
You're a storyteller. I didn't realize that. This is great.
So I was in Korea for 2 years. And it was good. It was a really good experience. It opened me up to the world in a lot of ways. I still really, really love Korea. I like going back to visit. But just teaching English, just teaching 15 hours of English a week was not so terribly interesting. I wanted to actually do some teacher education work. And a job came up in the MA TESOL program at Bilkent University in Turkey. And I applied for it and got it.
Wow.
And I wound up spending 7 years at Bilkent, working with just absolutely amazing people. My bosses included Frederica Stoller, Charlie Basham, Patricia Sullivan. These were all Fulbrighters who would come in to direct the program for 1 or 2 years. And basically I was the long-term staff, and eventually Julie Matthews-Eidenlaw was the other long-termer. It was a great program. It brought teachers from all over Turkey. It was the only program in the country where most Turkish teachers in the university system were required, if they were going to do an MA, they had to do it at their local university. The Bilkent program had a special exemption written into the laws that we could get students from all over the country.
Oh, wow.
And so it created this whole community of teachers from different places getting to know each other, meeting each other, built long-term friendships. It was a really great program.
Wow.
And I was there for 6 years, and then 7th year I had sabbatical, and I spent that at Anadolu University in Eskişehir, Turkey. And then after that, I basically had hit a ceiling. And I couldn't go up.
Yeah.
So
had you really kind of accomplished what you wanted to at that point, or was it more the ceiling got in the way?
The ceiling got in the way. Yeah. Basically, it was a really tough system to get promoted in. And the program, because the program was oddly constructed in the university, it wasn't situated anywhere.
Right.
And so it didn't support people moving up. And so I went to American University of Armenia for half a year. And that's the only job I've ever walked out on. And I left there because basically it was a conflict. 6 of us in the faculty had a conflict with the administration over health insurance. And so we all left at the end of the first semester.
Yeah.
And by pure luck, one of my colleagues from Turkey, Martin Endley, had landed at Hanyang University in Korea. And another one of my former bosses from Turkey, Sarah Klinghammer, was at University of Oregon. And Hanyang and University of Oregon had a joint program where teachers would do a certificate at Hanyang and then could transfer credits to the MA at Oregon. And so they hired me in to Korea, and I spent another 3+ years there at Hanyang.
This is quite a checkered past you've had.
I wouldn't say checkered, just mobile. Mobile.
Yeah.
And then I was planning to go back to Turkey, but the opening at Bilkent fell through, and so I wound up being hired by Teachers College in New York through Jim Purpura, whom I had met one time when he was on a specialist program in Turkey.
Mm.
So I went to New York for one semester. It was a disastrous semester. I arrived in New York and promptly got pneumonia. And basically, I was sitting in my office in New York at the end of the first semester. It had been a really, really tough semester. And Jim walked into the office. I was doing grades at the end of the term, and he looked at me and said, "How would you like to direct our program in Japan?" And I said, "Sure, I'll do that."
Yeah.
And that's how I became director of the Teachers College program in Japan.
So what year did you come to Japan?
That would be 2009, January 2009.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I thought you were here earlier than that. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And I basically ran that program for 4.5 years. During the middle of that time, Teachers College in New York made a decision to close the program down, which was incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
Sort of managing the closure, managing all the details of negotiating the details of closing with MEXT, because we had special status through MEXT. I spent a number of days visiting offices in MEXT and reporting on the process of closing it down. And MEXT was entirely correct. They had a duty to protect Japanese students who'd signed up for this program.
Right.
And to make sure that we would try to help them finish. And I think we were largely successful at that.
Good, good.
And then again, sort of at the end of that, when everything was closed down, my plan once more was to go to Turkey. But Yasushi Sekiya, who had graduated from TC in New York with his EDD and worked at Kanda, he saw the closing of Teachers College as an opportunity for Kanda to fill that gap.
Right.
A program, basically a weekend program for working teachers. And he asked me to stay and help build that program. And that's what I've been doing for the past 5.5 years.
Right.
We
had one question before we go on to that, about any idea why the New York decided to close down Teachers College. Is that something you can sum up, or is it complicated?
There's a whole bunch of stuff, but the big issue was money.
Yeah.
Money, and also the administration in New York had changed, and they didn't have quite the level, they didn't have the connection to the program that previous administrations had.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. So you've just finished up at Kanda.
Yeah, my contract at Kanda will officially end at the end of March, but really everything is done now.
Mm.
And so looking ahead at the moment, in the spring, I'll be basically teaching English classes at Bilkent University's Shonan campus in Chigasaki, and at Shonan Institute of Technology here in Fujisawa, where I live.
Mm.
And then in the fall, I'll be teaching at both those places, but also I have teacher education classes at Ochanomizu and at Waseda. The Waseda is a class that I've been teaching for six years now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's
Yeah.
get into, since you're kind of focused on the teacher education stuff, I'm going to jump right into that. And there's so many places we can begin, but why do you think the teacher education is meaningful to you? Do you think that's what you do best?
Yeah, I do. In part because, one, I like working with teachers. Teachers are interesting people. You know, they do a really, really hard job on a daily basis. And, you know, when I first started doing it, I was much younger and very much full of myself, and the sense of I'm here to tell you how to teach. You know, here are things you can do. You don't know this.
Yeah, prescriptive kind of.
Yeah, and gradually over time, it's changed into John Hattie says it's a sin to tell someone how to teach, because all you're doing is telling them how you would teach. And so I see my job now more as helping teachers figure out how they want to teach and what tools they can use to achieve their goals.
So where do you begin that? Now we've got, certainly we've got veterans watching, and I'm sure we have newbies watching on YouTube and stuff, but where does it actually begin for you in messages that you want to get across to the teachers? And that can be from any perspective you choose, being a teacher or teaching or learning, or where's a starting point for you?
Well, I think there's a couple of starting points. One is, and I teach the sort of the foundation class at Kanda. I've taught it for the past 5 years. And I start off with certain points. One is a belief in reflective practice, that in order to be really effective as a teacher, you have to be thinking about what you're doing. You have to be willing to look at yourself, look at your practice, and try to understand what you're doing with your students and how it works. A second starting point is the importance of relationship with students. That if you're going to be an effective teacher, part of what you have to do is, a fundamental part is build a relationship with the students you work with. If your students know you and they like you and they really believe that you're trying to help them, they're going to do a lot more than if they don't like you. Right? And in fact, if you don't like the teacher, I'm sure we can think back over our lives and think about the teachers that we liked and the teachers that we didn't like.
Yeah.
I mean, I mentioned before my calculus teacher in high school. And I look back now, and I was a high school senior, and I was a bit of a jerk. But she didn't connect with me.
Yeah.
You know.
I think it's the difference between being open and being closed. Because when you tell this story, I think of Mr. Sanford and how closed I was to anything because he was just so mean to everybody.
Yeah.
And so being open, you somewhat have to be open to learn, but if you're sitting there closed, not much is going to happen unless you try to defy them, but that doesn't happen so often.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you think back on the teachers that you really loved. My 4th grade teacher, Mr. Fallon, who, I look back on that year in kind of awe. 4th grade, they hand out the books at the beginning of the year. You get your books. And we got our English books. And I didn't realize this didn't kick in until like years later. I realized in the entire year, we put the book in the desk and we never opened it. All of our sort of language arts things were activities that he came up with that had us doing real things.
Yeah.
You know, we learned how to write formal letters by writing to real people.
Yeah, sure.
Very
cool.
Yeah, it was really, really good. So I think that's another starting point, is that it's not enough to know the language and be able to describe the language to students, but you have to connect to them, right? We were talking the other night when we did the sound check about mantras, and my first teaching mantra is always, meet your students where they are. Right.
Unpack that for us. What does it mean where they are, linguistically, or what do you mean?
Well, linguistically, culturally, in their lives. There's no sense in being sort of the teacher up on the mountaintop yelling down to the students down below, the weather's fine, come on up. You have to go to where they are. A friend of mine has an alternative version of that, the same idea, but her version is teach the students in front of you.
Yeah.
Right? You don't get some kind of mythological perfect class, you get the students that you have.
Yeah.
And so you have to teach them. Well,
yeah.
Who are they?
Yeah. Yeah.
What are they doing there? And for so many Japanese students, if you look at university classes, well, why are they in English class? I'm sure many of them would rather not be in English class.
Yeah.
Right? And so how do you connect to them to make English class something that they value? And so you have to make that personal connection.
Yeah.
Right?
It's never about English at the very beginning. I had a very wise Japanese junior high school teacher who studied with me for about 10 years at my house in a private lesson. And she said she walks in every year, this is grade 7 and 8 English, and that everybody hates it by the middle of grade 8. But she walks in and says 20% are going to love me no matter what I do because they're excited about English, and 20% are going to hate me no matter what I do, and 60% are sitting in the middle wondering about me. And that's where I start, because if I can get them on my side, then I've got 80 against 20, and they'll kind of fall in line and get with the program. And I just thought it was clever.
You got 20% in, yeah. That's the right sort of approach. You have to know the students. I mean, it's one of the things that I started teaching English classes again last semester at Bunkyo.
Yeah.
And realizing that I meet the students once a week for an hour and 20 minutes is in some ways really, really frustrating. How much can I get to know them in that little bit of time?
Yeah. How many in a class?
25 to 30.
Yeah, it's a blur after 20 for me. I can, I had 8 years of teaching 12 in a class, and it ruined me forever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and of course, with attendance being irregular for some of them.
Yeah.
How do you get to know them?
Yeah.
And on the other hand, if they aren't going to give me a chance by showing up, I do what I can when they're there, but if they just show up, it's not for me, they leave, there's not much I can do.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's their responsibility, right? That's the least they can do is show up.
Right. Well, but you want to move them beyond that. And there's an article that Devin Woods wrote in a festschrift for Dick Allwright called Who Does What in the Management of Language Learning. It has a long subtitle that I can't remember, but it's all about the negotiation that really has to take place between students and teachers over who's responsible for what in terms of managing learning. And for lots of students, their assumption is the only decision they have to make is to show up for class. And the job of managing their learning is completely up to the teacher.
Right.
And as a teacher, I know that it can't be that way.
Yeah.
And that they have to take a certain amount of responsibility for their own learning. And part of my job is to show them that they can do that and be successful at it and convince them that it's worthwhile.
Yes.
You know, and this is, you know, the big work of the teacher isn't explaining the present perfect.
Right.
The big work of the teacher is getting the students to believe that they can learn and that they can do it themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Amen. My favorite Dick Allwright line, I'm a huge fan of a lot of his writing, but my favorite line from his is teaching a class is a co-production between teacher and students, but the only problem is the students don't know their lines.
And sometimes the teacher doesn't either.
Yeah, yeah. But it's so that's so interesting, hey, that you go in there with a plan, but yeah. Now, do you go ahead?
I see Phil has put up that Dick Allwright is one of his favorite ELT authors.
Yes.
He's also one of my favorites. So I'll give you my favorite line from him. He says at one point, maybe the quality of life in the classroom is more important than the quality of learning.
Oh, nice.
And what he's pitching is the idea that we can make students learn stuff. You know, we can.
Yeah.
There's a certain amount we can make them learn, but if we make them hate doing it, the minute they're done with us, they're done with learning.
Yeah.
But if we create a quality classroom, then, you know, where people want to be there and they come because they're with their friends and they help each other, they interact with each other. Yeah. So this is the stuff Tim Murphy does on group dynamics and getting people to think about ideal classmates. You know, if we create that quality of life in the classroom, then as Art suggests, the students can become lifelong learners.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. My head is just spinning here. I have 10 questions and thoughts for just about every second sentence that comes out of your mouth. So I'm trying to organize myself here. A few minutes ago, you talked about the starting points, one being reflective practice, another being relationships and the importance of relationships with students and connecting. Are there any other big ones before I go in deeper on these?
Well, let me just toss out, and again, we talked about this the other night, but I really have sort of 3 teaching mantras.
Oh, do that. Yeah, that's on my list. Let's go through your mantras.
Yeah, so the first one, as I said, is, you know, meet your students where they are.
Yeah.
The second one is do less, do it deeper. And this is a lesson that I have to keep learning over and over.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of teachers, you know, we want to do so much. We think, oh, I can help my students do so much. And the realization that I have an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And in truth, if my students walk out knowing one thing that they didn't know before, they're smarter.
Yeah.
You know, and if I hurry through a lot of stuff to cover things, it may sort of skim the surface of their brain and not stick.
Yeah.
If we spend more time and work on less stuff and really focus in on getting something, I can feel a little bit better that they're walking out of the room smarter than when they came in.
Can you take us through any kind of example? Does anything come to mind? It might not, but I'm trying to think of what's a sample of you learning that you could or should or did go deeper.
All kinds of little things.
Yeah.
Like a workshop that I do for teachers all the time is on recycling materials. Because teachers often complain, the course book is so thin, I have to keep printing out all these extra materials because there's not enough in the course book. But students really need to be exposed to that language in the course book again and again. And it doesn't mean if you have a long reading passage, a page-long reading passage, that you read that reading passage over and over, because that's boring.
Yeah.
But maybe after you've done some work on intensive reading and you've worked on comprehension, take a paragraph of that text, 1 or 2 classes later, and say, do you remember that thing we read last week? Well, here's a paragraph from it, but it's missing some words. Without looking, try to put them back, right? And depending upon the level of the student, you might, here's the words I pulled out of here.
Sure.
If it's really low level, I put them in order.
Yeah.
Right. So the first word that you see is the first word to go back in the text. If you've got higher level students, you can just say, there's 6 missing words.
Yeah.
And again, lots of teachers are tempted to pull out a lot of words. I think if you've got one paragraph, if you pull out 3 or 4 words that you want students to remember, you want them to know, that's enough.
Yeah.
Right? Giving them lots of words isn't going to help them learn all those words.
That's right. Yeah.
And so you do less and spend more time on it. Going back and reusing material, I think, is an important thing that teachers don't do enough of. When I talk with Japanese junior and senior high school teachers about this, I give them a reading passage to read at the beginning of the workshop. And then I say to them, I want you to fold it up, crumple it up, get rid of it. Put it somewhere where you can't see it. And I ask them, why did I ask you to do this? And they all look kind of confused. And I say, when your students do a reading in the book and they turn the page, do they ever look at it again?
Right.
And we should make them go back and look at it again.
Yeah.
Because that's extra exposures.
Yeah. That's a good example. I got it. That was really helpful. So you said to meet students where they are and do less, do it deeper. What's number 3?
Number 3, explaining isn't teaching.
Can you explain that?
Yeah. Lots of Japanese high school, junior high school teachers spend a lot of time in the classroom explaining English to their students. Right?
Talk.
Yep. And, I always say to the students in the program at Kanda, no student ever learned English from a teacher's explanation of it. Right? But the teacher, and I understand their fear. Their fear is that if I don't explain it, students will be lost or confused.
Yeah.
And I sort of make the counter argument to them that being lost and confused is a normal part of learning a language.
Ooh, that's a mic drop. How do they react to that?
Well, I basically asked them, think back on your own experiences. Were there times where you didn't understand things and you had to work at figuring it out? Now, yeah. It's like, why not give your students that experience?
Yeah.
Well, maybe they won't figure it out this time. Maybe they'll figure it out wrong. But the having to work and really try and work out what the language is and what it's doing is going to help them learn more than an explanation. And again, teachers do the explanation because they think the explanation is going to give students a lot. But
well, it's scripted, hey? It's safe because it's scripted. I have a famous story of a very enthusiastic, hardworking Japanese teacher sitting next to me and asking me, is this sentence okay? When I was a young girl, I used to play with dolls. And I said, yeah, it sounds fine. She said, what about this one? As a youngster, I often found myself playing with my dolls. Yeah, that sounds great. How about this one? And she went on for 12 sentences. And I realized she was just trying to make sure that nobody got off script. You know,
Right.
it was completely canned and therefore foolproof.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you one that I've been having with a professor who I very much like. And we teach in classrooms next to each other. And he teaches the lowest level at our university of first years. And he's comes from a high school teaching background, very teacher-centered. I'm in the next room with a little bit higher level class doing very student-centered stuff. And we've talked back and forth, and he came to watch my class one time, and we've kind of gotten to the point of him thinking that student-centered does not work with students who are very, very low. And therefore, he thinks they need to have a teacher-centered approach for X amount of time before they're able to negotiate student-centered. What do you think about that?
Um, I think there's two different things involved.
Yeah.
One is that really, really low-level students, because they're really low, they can't necessarily generate a lot of language on their own.
Hmm.
And this is an argument that Rintaro Sato has
Yes.
made, that the teacher should be a great source of input. And Paul Nation has said this as well.
Yeah.
The teacher can provide meaningful input to the students.
Yeah.
Read stories to them. Tell them stories, do vocabulary games, describe a vocabulary item and have students guess what it is.
Yeah.
And so is that really teacher-centered? I mean, the teacher is the major source of input, but I really don't like the terms teacher-centered and student-centered.
Right. So let me just say that teacher-centered is basically him standing at the whiteboard, again, explaining vocabulary, explaining usage of vocabulary, explaining grammar, how it works,
Yeah.
and students ferociously taking notes.
Right, because it's going to be on the test.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would oppose both this notion of teacher-centered and student-centered to a concept that I prefer, which is learning-centered.
Oh.
Everything that we do, this is, again, one of the big points I make to the students at the beginning of the foundations class at Kanda is, why do people come to classrooms? They come to classrooms to learn. Everything that we do in the classroom should be about learning. And anything that we do that helps students learn is good practice.
Mm.
The teacher standing in front of the room with low-level students and engaging them in language through a story or a guessing game, where the teacher is the major source of input. This is learning-centeredness.
Yes.
As students move up in level, clearly they can begin to supply more of the language on their own.
Yeah.
And teachers should want to hand over the opportunities to interact and try to use language and do things with language to the students.
Yeah. Well, you got me there when you said engaging the students, because that's, to me, the key word.
Yep, that's the central word. That's basically the work of my career. I mean, the engagement is, I think, the central issue of the classroom.
Yeah.
And engagement both on the part of students, we want students to be engaged, but teachers have to be engaged.
Yeah.
Right? This is Prabhu, in the famous 1990 article, "There is no best method." Why?
Yeah. Yeah.
He lays out the case that when we talk about good teaching, it's not about any particular method.
Mm-hmm.
The teacher is involved in the classroom.
Right.
There are really good grammar translation teachers.
Yeah.
There are really, really good, let's see. Oh God, I can't think of it. Army method, right?
Drilling.
Right. The listen and repeat.
Yeah. Drilling. Yeah.
if the teacher really believes in what they're doing with that, and the students can see that, and the students believe that it's helping them learn, the students will learn.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no method that makes students dumber.
That's right. Yeah. And they've said that we've had a flavor of the month or method of the month over the years, and nobody's learning any quicker.
Yeah. And came up with it. Audiolingual. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so, you know, yeah, the whole point of doing all this stuff is to engage the students. And this is why it's actually important for teachers to do reflective practice, because how can you know what you believe in?
Yeah.
The teacher, if you don't look at what you do and think about it and consider it and experiment with it.
Yeah. So you said, I just lost it. I want to get into this idea. I've got this bio somebody wrote for you, or you supplied them with, saying that Bill's interested in reflective practice, teacher education, teacher narratives, and the messiness of the classroom.
Yeah.
So I'd like you to tell us about the messiness of the classroom. Phil's been waiting for that the whole time. You see him smiling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever been in a non-messy classroom?
No, of course not.
I mean, classrooms are messy for a bunch of reasons.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a weird thing because we like to think of classrooms as neat and orderly, as places that are well organized. Students come in and sit in rows. They all face the front. But every classroom is messy. One big reason is there's so many people in it. And they're all different. You know, every classroom is a multi-level classroom.
Yeah.
Right? As much as we try to say, oh, these students are all this level, any teacher knows that there are differences,
Yeah.
often big differences across students in any classroom.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? So the students are part of the messiness, and the teacher in being with the students. The other part of the messiness is just the messiness of language and language learning. And again, there's this belief that language is a set of rules. And if you learn the set of rules, then you know the language. But all the evidence that we have now really works against that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the linear argument and everything else, it's just not.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's all this variation that's going on.
Yeah.
And so anybody, you know, Allwright again, you know, going back to Allwright, when he talks about the fact that teaching is always more than learning, right? We teach stuff and students don't learn it. You know, this is the teacher thing of, oh, we went over that last week. And at the same time, learning is always more than teaching.
Yeah.
Students learn things that we don't teach. And it's unpredictable.
Yeah.
You know, we don't know what's going to happen. And that's part of the excitement of it.
That takes a certain, I noticed, I wrote in an article once, I called these things slow moments, SLOW. And the acronym meant sudden learning opportunity window, you know, and it's when the bee flies into the classroom and suddenly everybody's there. Or when the student Hiroko goes, oh, haraheta, I'm hungry, in a big voice, and everybody's zoned in on her. And I learned over time, after 10,000 hours in the classroom or something, I had enough knowing what was going on that I could jump on one of those moments and bring everybody into it and play with it and then get it back into what I was trying to get across to them in that class.
Right.
And once I noticed them, it's like when you notice your first Volkswagen Beetle, or you buy your first Volkswagen Beetle, you see them everywhere after that. And I started seeing these opportunities, you know, and sort of using them. So that's part of me loving the messiness of the classroom. Once I got in Japanese, you say yoyu, when you got enough extra headspace that I'm almost like I'm above watching what's going on now as it's happening, and able to tweak in different ways.
Right. Well, yeah, and somebody's put up that, yeah, Phil, that this sounds similar to, but not quite the same as teachable moments. Or I would go with the term that Allwright has used of learning opportunities.
Yeah.
And one of Allwright wrote an article about sort of switching our perspective on what happens in the classroom from focusing on teaching points to focusing on learning opportunities.
Yep.
And one of the points is that learning opportunities, you know, you talk about as a teacher, you identify these slow moments as learning opportunities. But the real truth is there are learning opportunities happening all the time in the classroom that we don't see.
Absolutely.
Students have them.
Yeah.
They have these moments, the student suddenly realizes, oh, that's what that means.
Yes.
Oh, that's how that works.
Yeah.
Right? Classrooms are full of learning opportunities. And, you know, as a teacher, we're never going to identify all of them.
Right.
And every student is going to experience different ones.
Yeah.
What we want to do, you know, this is one of Allwright's points, is that we want to teach to maximize learning opportunities.
Yeah.
We want to have every learner have the chance to get something.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And in a sense, this is a line of thinking that I think really works well with the idea that all classrooms are multi-level.
Sure. I've remembered the question I forgot a little while ago, and I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget it again. This might be difficult, but you mentioned earlier that you think of the classroom as not teacher-centered or student-centered, but learner-centered, and that we should try to maximize learning opportunities.
Right.
Now, in your own evolution as a teacher, and you said earlier you went in there a little full of yourself saying this is the way to do everything, or this is with teacher training. But in the classroom, can you think of any things that you realized weren't learning centered and therefore you stopped doing them?
Oh, that's a tough question.
I know it's a tough question. Yeah. And if not, that's okay.
Things I've stopped doing, things I've tried to stop doing. I've tried to stop explaining so much.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I want to have me talking less in the classroom. Although Rintaro Sato has convinced me that in certain situations, me talking meaningfully with students is actually a good thing to do.
Sure.
Things that I've given up on.
Did you, this will prompt you a little bit, but did you, in your career of the teaching English side, did you use textbooks much, or did you throw them out, or where do you sit on the textbook thing? Because that's when I was the most obedient little teacher in the world for the first 10 years, you know, doing every section of, I think Coast to Coast was one of my first textbooks I had to use. You know, and not skipping. I remember feeling criminal when I skipped my first section, that I thought, well, that's not very good now, is it? Yeah.
I think I always saw the limits in that. Part of it was the exposure to Elliot Judd. Even before I got that year working with him, I'd encountered him. I sort of did, and he always talked about the textbook as being sort of a mannequin that you dressed in different ways. right? And you could do different things with it, but it was never complete.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, I once worked at a place which I won't name, and the director was very much by the book.
Yeah.
Do the book, take these students through the book. It was so boring.
Mm.
The students were bored. I was bored. Um, and so we just, you know, on days when the director came to observe, I would tell the students, we're going to have to do this. She also mandated correcting every error. Since most of my students were in their 50s and they were recent immigrants to the US, nothing got done for correcting every error.
Right. Right.
The you know, but on days when, you know, we were left to ourselves, you know, you close the door, the old joke, teachers, you close the door and nobody knows what you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had conversations about things, we talked about stuff. Um, we did the book. The book had some useful stuff in it, but we had 3 hours together, 4 nights a week.
Yeah.
And just doing the book for 12 hours, that was deadly.
Yeah. Sure. Sure.
You know, I like textbooks. Textbooks organize a bunch of material. The real question as a teacher is, what do you do with that material? Like I said, you see in Japanese schools, the teachers are rushing to keep up with the curriculum. They've got to keep up. They've got to keep up. And so there's no recycling. There's no going back and doing things again.
Mm.
And that workshop I do is showing them, here's a 5-minute activity that you can do at the beginning of class or the end of class that recycles some material so students are exposed to language again, and it gives them a greater depth of learning, a greater opportunity to really learn this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Believe it or not, we're getting near the end of an hour. That was pretty quick, but I got 7 minutes left here. But I wanted to. I always close up with one of these questions about what are some things that you are interested in personally these days, and other things you might be interested in professionally. Either order.
Personally,
I've seen some of your cooking pictures up on Facebook.
Yeah, I like cooking. I like experimenting with flavors. Try to do more of it.
Mm.
The other sort of personal thing is for personal reasons, I'm basically committed to being here in Japan now. So I really should work on my Japanese.
Yeah.
And so starting to make a push in that direction of, the problem is when you're teaching a certain number of hours, where's the time to study the language?
Yeah.
And also being in Fujisawa rather than being in Tokyo, there's simply less access to lessons.
Yeah.
But I'm going to work on that. That's, I think, a big push.
Good. Okay. Yeah, me too. I mean, I've come into this new job this year, and I got 30 emails yesterday, and fully 15 of them were long and in Japanese, and I've been just drowning in but on the good side is it's quite a limited, in university life, it's quite a limited set of vocabulary that just keeps popping up over and over again.
Right, yeah.
So hopefully.
ESP, or JSP in this case.
JSP, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, how about professionally? What kinds of things are you?
Professionally, the like I said, engagement. Chris Tardy and I did the article on flow 15 years ago. And I'd actually like to come back to that again. And I spent a long time trying to quantify flow. And there's a bunch of people doing quantitative approaches to it now. Peter McIntyre's done some, Jean-Marc Dewell, Subramanish in Canada. And yet I'm dissatisfied by the quantitative approaches. And I think in terms of teachers looking at their experience of the classroom, qualitative, giving stories of moments like Chris and I did,
Yeah.
I think is an important contribution. And I think it would be really interesting to look at Japanese teachers. We're looking at university teachers in Turkey then, looking at Japanese junior and senior high school teachers, and what are their moments of flow, if any, in the classroom. The other thing that I'm sort of interested in this way is teachers' emotional engagement in the classroom. And looking at teacher emotions, emotion in the classroom. I'm working on a paper right now, which I presented at PLL3 last year, of a Turkish teacher who was being basically punished by her boss by having to teach 2 sections of repeat students. And she agreed to basically do a weekly diary and a weekly sort of affective measurement tool. And so we've got all this data, and it's taken me a long time to figure out, but the real connection here is the relationship between emotional engagement and professional satisfaction. There was a Japanese professor, Kazuyoshi Sato, who talked about satisfaction in teaching comes from having more positive moments than negative moments in the classroom. That's what satisfaction is.
Yeah.
And the instrument that I used with this woman measured positive emotions and negative emotions, and you can get basically an emotion score, a mood score for the week.
Yeah.
Out of that. And the interesting thing in her case was that with the one class, the evening class of repeat students, I asked her, what was your satisfying event of the week, and what was your emotional state during it? What was the most dissatisfying event of the week? What was your emotional state? For the evening class, even the satisfying events were emotionally negative. That's how much she hated teaching that class.
Oof.
And in the end, basically, the students basically were saying, why are, you know, because she kept trying.
Yeah.
She kept trying. And the students were saying, why are you wasting time on us?
Yeah.
You know, and eventually everybody gave up.
Yeah.
That was one of the saddest classes.
That's a sad way to end this hour, Bill.
Well, the plus side is you know, the other class was a much more positive experience.
Yeah.
There were negative moments, but there were a bunch of positive ones as well, where she connected with the students, and the students were willing to put in the effort to do things.
Yeah.
And now I'm doing that now with a couple of teachers who've come out of Kanda, looking at when they've moved into new jobs, the emotional engagement of a new working environment, which is something I have to think about now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. What you just said on the students had kind of, why haven't you given up on us yet, and stuff like that. That really triggers the thing that I'm most interested right now. It comes out of some of John Hattie's work, where he's saying that you and I have talked about the teacher efficacy and the teacher collective efficacy, but the second factor that he argues has a huge impact on students' achievement is students' own self-expectations. And this hit me years ago, and it might have been like Dr. Phil or somebody who said that line about, we produce the results in life that we think we deserve to get. And I've just in the classroom seen that over and over again, where students have told me their goal, and I kind of in my earlier days went, really? You know? And learning through many errors that students basically can get where they want to get way more often than I've ever been able to judge where they're going to get. And how can I impact that in the students? How can I raise their own self-expectations is a fascinating puzzle for me.
And often those things that students want and they're interested in, they feel that those things are not connected to English class. One of the teachers that I worked with at Kanda, teaching at a sort of really low-level high school in Chiba.
Yeah.
You know, many of the students, he was convinced the only reason they were there was because their parents wouldn't let them drop out.
Mm.
And he was convinced that they didn't really care about learning English. They weren't interested. And I have students do a project I call Ask Your Students. You have to ask the students one WH question that you don't know the answer to, and that every student can give you an answer. And you know, asking students, why aren't you motivated to learn English, is a terrible question.
Right.
But he asked them, we played with it, changed around, and he asked, when are you motivated to learn English?
Oh, good.
And he expected that most of them would say never.
Right.
And to his shock, 93% of his students indicated that there were times when they were motivated to learn English.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what he learned was that those times had nothing to do with the curriculum of the English program in school.
Absolutely.
One student had a family member who had married a non-Japanese, and the student wanted to be able to communicate with that person.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Another student was into online gaming, and to be part of the team in a multiplayer game, he needed more English.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
All real world, hey? Real world stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, students do want to learn. They do want to learn English. I had 2 students at Bunkyo this term who were, in my class, they were not terribly good students, but I learned, they missed the final exam. I had to fail them. But they both had gone off to Australia over the term break to learn English.
Yeah, great.
They wanted to learn. They just didn't think what we were doing at Bunkyo was helping them.
Sure, sure. Yeah.
You know? And so, yeah, we should assume that students want to learn in general. And if we meet them where they are, that first mantra, we're going to learn a lot of stuff that should change how we teach.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. All righty. We're going to wrap up now. And I'm going to have to invite you back next year for part 2 of Bill Snyder, because we just scratched the surface. There's all kinds of other stuff we can do. There's Ann Hendler. If anybody wants to say anything or type anything, I guess I'll stay here for another couple of minutes before I have to go get the laundry out of the washing machine.
Let's say cheese.
Yeah. Any comments? Anybody?
Thanks, Bill. It's great to recycle some of these ideas you've talked about. I've heard you talk about before. It's good stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah, thank you for stopping in.
Yeah, good to be here.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a nice thing. This is sort of, you know, get a bunch of teachers together and just talk.
Yeah. Anne has been with us since day one, Ann Hendler, who's outside of Kyoto. And so it's that's a real big smile on her face. So you seem to have enjoyed tonight, Anne. Thank you. Yeah, I loved it. It was great fun. I never got to any other questions on my list. That's always a good sign. Phil, you're being awfully quiet. Say something before we wrap up.
Yeah, I had myself on mute. I'll let everyone else go first, but I really loved it. I really enjoyed being reminded of a lot of different little nuggets and important things that sometimes when we're busy thinking about our teaching and so on, we sometimes forget some of those really important principles just that we should keep forefronted. So it's nice to kind of bring them all together in one session. So it's been a very valuable hour. Thank you.
Yeah. Phil and I have been working hard for a couple of years now on our own TESOL certificate through iTDi, and you absolutely sound like a kindred spirit in so many of the conversations. I think there's nobody else I've talked about teaching and learning with as much as with Phil Brown. But man, I said to him the other day, when Bill and I, when we did our sound check the other night, we were kind of finishing each other's sentences, and it was a really nice, immediately nice feeling.
I'm, you know, yeah, rethinking how we do. I mean, that's part of the whole Kanda program, is taking a different approach to teacher education. That's, it's really much more practical, and more reflective, and that's going to be better for teachers all around.
I learned very early in my teaching to never try to do anything perfectly, but I think I had a natural reflective approach by just saying, how can we make this just incrementally better next time? You know, and that just seemed to become one of my mantras. You know, I'm okay when things blow up, and they did regularly at the beginning of my teaching career. But I also always had that sense of, okay, that was, I never want to do that again, or I want to try it again next year. And what am I, and we used to talk about that with the other teachers, you know, how could I make it better?
And sometimes though, you might want to repeat something that went really well, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And I think it may be helpful to just think of I think it's a Japanese proverb that says, you never step in the same river twice. So it's like you got to be present to the current, you know, the literal currents and undercurrents going on any given day when,
Well,
you know, so many things going on with so many variables, like you were talking about, so many things going on with the, you know, different students in your classroom on any given day. There are so many different things going on.
Right.
So
the weather, the school schedule, everything, their personal lives, all that stuff. The very last thing I just wanted to mention that maybe we can get together and talk about some other time is that for the JOLT conference this year, we very specifically put a section in the description of the conference theme called Coming of Age. And that I have met so many wise people who've put in a lot of time in teaching, have really learned their craft. And I really believe that it's part of my own professional interest is us standing up and taking some educational leadership in Japan and kind of trying to get in the conversation more with MEXT, the Ministry of Education, and all that, the other, like, be a player. And I really feel comfortable talking to anybody now about teaching and learning because I've got 30 years of it under my belt and generally positive feedback through those 30 years. So I'm really interested in having that conversation and not, we met, for example, Catherine Oki and I and Wayne Malcolm, we met with one of the plenary speakers, the Sako sensei, the president of the university in Kyoto. And his very first question to us is, so what's the outcome of this conference? Do you guys put out a statement at the end of the conference to sum up? And I said, no, we just meet. Every year we meet and we learn together, but there's no outcome as such. And that's something that I would like to discuss more.
Well, I mean, what about the publication at the end?
Yes. Yes. Again, the proceedings is that kind of outcome of it, but it seems to still be internal. It's for us. It's accessible to others, but we are not promoting things we've learned as much as I think we should be. It's just a personal, you know. I would like to get in those conversations with how English is taught in Japan, I guess.
Did he give any, like, idea of what might be a suitable outcome that he's
that's what he's going to talk about, and I encouraged him to, because he has a very rich experience here and going all the way through the Japanese system up to becoming president this year, and put a lot of effort into learning Japanese and writing Japanese, and so he's got a very unique perspective of it all, and he has ideas that he would like to see, but he kind of feels alone. I think that's my reading of it. is that he doesn't feel like he's heard a bunch of other people talking about the ideas. I started riffing with him because he's been here about as long as I have, and we've had some similar experiences. So it was fascinating, but I can't wait to hear what he comes up with during his plenary.
Well, actually, this kind of reminds me of a video I was watching of you, Stephen, and Phil talking in one of your videos. What did you do? What did you do after the conference? And you, Phil, you were talking about going through and emailing people that you had met, or
oh, right, yeah,
you know, that kind of thing. So, and I mean, thinking for every participant there must be, you know, various outcomes.
Yeah.
Like this last JALT conference, I heard so many people say, "Oh, that was one of the top 3 conferences I've been to," and from somebody who's been to a lot of them.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I heard the same thing.
And yet for me, I was feeling, you know, I had a very different experience for various other reasons, and I didn't get as, you know, so I wasn't having the same kind of
reaction,
you know, peak experience or whatever on some, as I've had at other times. And, you know, I mean, there are various things going on in every conference goer probably. So they're,
sure.
But I mean, I mean, the thing is, it's such a huge, what?
Think about the conference as being a multi-level classroom.
Yeah.
Right.
Essentially, the learning opportunities for everyone are different.
Right.
Yes.
Even you and Catherine have the job of being the teachers in a sense of organizing this, but you have no idea what's going to happen.
Not a clue.
Right.
And just embracing the messiness of it all.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, just riffing off what Bob was saying. I remember quite a while back, it was almost 10 years ago.
We lost your
mic.
Lost your mic. You're gone.
Did you hit the wrong button? Or?
No, it's just there you go. I think you're back.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, just going off what Bob was saying. I remember actually nearly about 10 years ago, there was a guy on the same MA program as myself at the time, and he went to his first JALT, and afterwards he decided he was going to write down his top 10 from his conference experience, and he shared that with a bunch of us. And it was so refreshing to see like somebody else's path through the conference, and you know, that first kind of conference energy experience that he had as well. And then it kind of prompted us to ping back a few things between each other and so on. So it's kind of, if you look at the multi-level classroom, I guess it's a little bit like having a peek into different classmates' learning journals. And I think if you get that shared on larger platforms after JALT and so on, then that can be quite interesting for people to be able to go and see, because not everybody has those same connections once they leave a conference.
Right.
Wow, this is Bill, this is a testament to you. We've always stopped right on time and hung up, but this feels like overtime with Bill Maher.
That's your laundry situation.
It's getting moldy. So anyway, let's wrap up there, and thank you very much. We're here every second week, and we either have an open mic or I have a guest come in and tell your friends or suggest if anybody. I hope, Bill, if you've enjoyed doing it, tell people in your circle that it was fun. I'm sure you told us things you had no idea you were going to be talking about tonight. Yeah, that's the beauty of it. And also Phil has the teacher's room happening on Saturday mornings, right? Every second, and that you can see that on their website or anything else. So thank you very much for coming. And
thanks you guys for organizing. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bill. I'm going to stop the recording.